Welcome to the Over the Hump podcast. Your gateway to the world of the iconic Brahman breed of cattle. At BRC Ranch, our passion for Brahman cattle runs deep. Join us as we delve into the heart of this extraordinary breed, unveiling its rich history, exploring industry trends, and sharing captivating stories that define the American Brahman. BRC Ranch stands as the pinnacle of Brahman excellence in America, boasting a decade-long legacy of champions and housing the finest Brahman bulls worldwide. It's not just about cattle, it's about a legacy that reverberates across ranches and hearts. Brought to you by BRC Ranch, where the Brahman legacy thrives and stories are woven into the very fabric of ranching. This is Over the Hump. And now your hosts, Brendan Cutrer, Rachel Cutrer, and Keaton Dodd.
Thank you all for joining us in another episode of the Over the Hump podcast. Today, myself, Brandon Cutrer, and Jimmy Sartwell sit down and discuss the pros and cons of fertility in Brahman and how to maintain selection to try to improve these traits in your cattle. Hope you enjoy.
So, kind of where my head's been, and I've got wrote on my paper Keaton's thoughts on how genetics and selection can improve fertility. And hopefully Dr. Jim Sanders never hears this because he'll probably tell me I'm crazy and none of this is true. But just kind of bouncing through each of these things, just thinking of how we can make it better from a management standpoint we talked about. But it's a lowly heritable trait, but there is some heritability to it. And so what can we do to improve? We talked about potentially shaving some days off of gestation length. And there's a heritability to gestation length. And so if you maybe make some selection principles based on reducing gestation length, I think we could just give ourselves a few more days to mess with, basically. Another one, you had mentioned very early in the podcast, just the crazy amount of variability in puberty across the basis of Brahman cattle, specifically Indicus-based cattle. And my conventional wisdom has always been scrotal circumference and age at puberty are supposed to be directly correlated. And looking back at my data from the Angus Association we were looking at earlier, scrotal circumference is the second most heritable trait that the Angus Association keeps track of. So if in fact we selected more heavily on scrotal circumference when we're turning out bulls, I think we could help with at least making a more consistent age at puberty to where at least we know where we're working at. And then the last thing, and I think everybody probably agree with this, but just from what we talked through, bringing it back into the light, would be selecting our replacement heifers that were born earlier in the calving season. So I guess those would be my three things. I think that maybe if you, from a genetic standpoint, how you could improve it would be those three.
I know outfits in the Midwest that will not retain a female, period, or bull that was born in the last third of the calving season. They make a hard and fast, they're gone.
You think that's a good thing?
I think we make lots of bad decisions based on individual observations. The best heifer calf we ever had, but she weighed 108 pounds. But she didn't kill her mama. Her mama laid down and had her. But here's the other issue that we get into. A lot of these people that we talk to, a lot of the folks y'all run into at BIF, they're running 1,000 cows. They're having 1,000 natural calves, vaginal births a year. They can make rules like this that don't just literally decimate the dictionary definition, cut you to a tenth of where you were before. And there's a difference when you're working around 25 purebred Brahman cows and when you're working around 2,000 purebred unregistered Angus cows turned out outside of Miles City, Montana. It's a little bit different thing, but I will tell you this, just like we talked about, it's the math problem of the cow that keeps walking. Every year she stays as a spring calver, but she walks a heat cycle later every time. She's eventually going to have the calf that needs to come out. You've watched her do it for 3 years. You know it's coming. Why do you want to keep her daughters back? Period. And I guess one of the things I'm not an enormous, let's just go aspirate every friggin' cow in the world out there. But I'm sitting here looking at these thin first calf heifers that bred back in a drought last year and calved on a 370 to 405 day interval with no help from me. I didn't help them a lot. Natural service both times. That's the next cow I need to go aspirate is a couple of those. So, can we use it without going ape over it? But yes. But I just talked about using ET to fast track your fertility improvement, not to make a dadgum show heifer out of.
There you go.
Now, I'll probably get something thrown at me that way, but
And this has always been a concept or something that rolls around in my head freely most of the days when I'm just running around. And me and Brandon have talked about it too, but we've got some full sisters where one of those sisters is borderline maternal merit, and then some of them in that same mating might have been some of the lesser fertile cattle in the entire calf crop. And so it's interesting when we talk about genetics, environment, that in itself, I guess, would tell you that maybe genetics isn't as much of the puzzle as you think it is. But then back to what we were talking about, we talked management and how management directly affects fertility. We talked about the cow herself, and then we stuck a pin in something a little while, and I was going to run us back through the bull. And I don't know which one has the bigger effect. I don't think any of us are smart enough to know which one. But I guess, how's bull selection play into this decision making, Brandon?
I would say a lot of it, the bull to get out there and do what he's supposed to do. So, excuse me, whenever you start thinking the bulls you turn out and the bulls you have available to turn out, there's always the bulls that come out of the show barn were good show bulls and this and that. And boy, that's the one everybody wants to breed to. And then we've got those natural service sires that were raised in our bull development program that were just grown and they did a lot of traveling. They didn't eat near as much. They're in a fitter as in workout.
Yeah, like an
athletic look, Which of the bulls that get out there and get it done and take care of things? It's the ones that really cover the most cows seem to be the bulls that were developed at a slower rate versus the show bulls. It's the bulls that were out there tussling with one another, pushing on one another, building muscle mass, building athleticism, traveling where they need to travel, not shut up in a pen, and sometimes maybe even not the most gentle bulls. Those bulls get out there and hustle and take care of business.
They're competitive.
Yes. And it's the bulls that we tend to have trouble with or have in the past have been the bulls that might have been the big time show bulls that were really fat and pampered and taken care of but they were hemmed up in a stall all day and couldn't travel so they could be fatter to go win that show. And when you or say they went to collection before they ever saw a cow and they had somebody do the job for them artificially versus trailing a cow, mounting a cow, I don't want to say this word out loud because but because we are talking about stockmanship and animal husbandry, maybe it's not vulgar, but actually make penetration where they're supposed to do the job that they're supposed to do. How do we get around those issues? So I know within our own program, just seeing those observations between the two ends of the spectrum and knowing that, hey, this bull, yeah, he was a very good show bull, but at the same time, and I know he's going to be a good semen sales bull, which is a huge portion of our income, but I still want to use him naturally. How do I work around that problem? So, what we've started doing here on the ranch is when those bulls start to get that age where they're not quite breeding age, but they're thinking about it, they're not fat as they are as a 3-year-old bull who never had to do anything. They still got that want to. Let them start messing with a few heifers. And before they ever go to collection, we made a rule here at our place to make sure they service a cow naturally and they know what to do before they go to collection. It also helps them at collection because the guys, they said they already know what to do when it gets time to do what they need to do. It already helps them out there. But when you get ready to bring those bulls back and turn them out on cows, they know what's going on. They've got the experience to get out there and say, hey, I'm supposed to follow that cow. hey, I'm supposed to mount that cow and breed that cow, and get them while they're still fit. Do them at younger age. Flip side of that, the downside of that is if you want to keep showing those bulls, they have a little more bull attitude. And so maybe it's not something you want to do with your kid show bull, but if you got a Harley and a Lynn and a Keaton and a Brandon who can kind of handle those bulls, or a Michael Joyce or whoever it may be that can handle those bulls and know how to, maybe that's something you can work on. But I think a lot of it's environment on the bull side. You make those bulls hustle, do what they need to do, and be fit and athletic, and they'll get the job done.
Well, that's libido, as our friend Dr. Sanders would call it. But one of the things that we've done in our outfit, a big fat show bull coming out of the barn is generally not an issue for us. Those Emperor Otter cattle that we've got, I can remember maybe one or two bulls that I've sold in the last 8 years that made 100 on their breeding soundness exam. I lead the league in 84s. They're 100% clear on the abnormalities, on their swimmers are all good. I lose 16 points underneath that Society of Theriourology form because of testicular circumference. I always fall in that second category on them. Rare, the 93 bull that we use is an exception. The 37 bull barely made the line the very first time as a 2-year-old that we fertility tested him, and had sufficient circumference for it. But I've made up my mind, and I've done it. The bulls here at BRC that we've used, that we've settled on the one I think who can make the biggest improvement in our cows in the shortest period of time, bring me more traits with fewer negatives, as the 160 bull. Good night. They look like 2 lantern batteries. They're not bananas.
Mm-hmm.
They look like those ones that go in those big Coleman lanterns that we used to have, and we'd take camping with us. We'd bring them home. We'd leave them on, and our mamas got mad at us because that $8 battery was shot. I think the one, and I've proven that I got to experience 51 years of my dad beating me to death about single trait selection. And I brought an outside bull in from outside the state of Texas, almost 100% on a 43 centimeter, 22 month of age scrotal circumference. He comes out of a herd that.
Repeat that one more time.
Yeah, 22 months of age. He was 43. He's 43 centimeters circumference. Wow. He's a big old dude. He's big enough. I've heard you tell a story about being a little bit worried about a bull might have been injured and there might be swelling there. No, that's just a naturally square testicle that's underneath them. I'll give a shout out. We've talked about Jim Sanders. I've talked a little bit about this with one Ewan Sanders earlier today, and his question was, well, back to what Brandon said earlier, when you're lining up for that March 10th calf to start with, what day did you say you were going to pull the bulls? August the 6th. On August the 6th, in Bowling or in Campbellton, Texas, or in South Florida, or in Phoenix, Arizona, it's been 100 degrees every day for 60 days at that point.
And might be 100% humidity.
And Owen's question was, well, it kind of has to do with how much epididymis that you got going there. Does the dude have shots? Does he have bullets all the way through the season? So you breed a little old banana, you breed a big, long, pendulous, banana-nutted bull, and you leave that joker out. Maybe part of the reason that cow starts sliding, through the season and she keeps sliding the heat, or maybe one that's been first third of the crop forever, you swap bulls to one that you really like, he misses her. Brandon misses her with that AI the first time around because she's in heat 2 days later. Then he misses her on the first one. Now you're 28 days behind. Add another 21 to catch her the next time. And maybe at that point, that old boy's been 100 degrees around all that surface area around those. Maybe he just doesn't have quite the load that he needs to have there. So one of the things, and one of the deals that when we started looking at, and when the three of us started talking, we had things in our cattle y'all wanted. Y'all dang sure have things in your cattle that I need. And one of them is, I think I can, back to your point about the heritability of scrotal circumference. What does scrotal circumference mean? The dude has achieved puberty. He can do what he is supposed to do. Whether he knows how to do it or not, as a big, youthful, clowny little bull calf is one thing. But this goes back to some work, though. You talked about that Overton that's done. We make assumptions about these Brahman cattle that they're all super slow.
I was just thinking that exact
For
same thing.
years, they've started running those bulls that they keep at 8 months of age through. They've had daggum 10-month-old bulls that not only will make and pass a sample, they'll freeze. The semen will freeze.
That's
So
impressive.
they exist.
Yeah.
I ain't never seen a whole lot of TAES prefixes winning the international show or the All-American or the Hunt County Fair.
But each year during that maternal merit award ceremony, you see it awfully quite a bit.
He picks a lot of them up. Larry Bartle picks a
Yep.
lot of them up. Lauren Pratt picks them
Steve
up. Our friend
Wilkins.
George Kempfer picks them
Yep.
up. Steve Wilkins picks them up. So somewhere between there and the other end of the spectrum,
So
there's room for all of us.
Making that point there, a lot of this time a lot of this podcast, we've been talking about environment. When you think environments, a lot of those names you just named, whether it be Lauren Pratt, let's just take the two most extreme of that group. Lauren Pratt to the west in the desert, and the Kempfers down in the marsh of Florida, and they're still able to make those cows work. That's probably where genetics come into. That could be the example of genetics that have been selected for generations and generations to match those unique environments.
Yeah, I don't think they were genetically selected to be more fertile. I think they were genetically selected to do better where they're at.
Yes.
And then that in turn makes them easier fleshing, which in turn makes them more fertile. I never really thought of it like that until you said it.
And one thing I know about each of those herds is that the Kempers basically got a one strike and you're out.
Yep.
Now they've got other avenues for that Brahman female that doesn't catch back to participate in their program in the crossbreeding side, but I don't think they put up with a lack of fertility for very long on the other end. And then you go to the other end of Mr. Pratt, who's told me on multiple occasions, the only time, his dad, Mr. Edwards, still alive in his 90s, but the only real big argument they ever had was Lauren told his dad about 20 years ago, hey, I'm tired of pulling calves and I'm tired of nursing them. If the calf's got to be nursed, that calf may just not make it. If that cow's got to be assisted, she may just not make it. And he goes, it was a hard 2 years around here. But by gum, we don't have issues with either of them anymore.
Yeah.
Because 0.12 is still not zero.
Yeah.
0.12 heritability is still not zero.
No, that's exactly right. One thing that just hit me too, if you're going out to buy a bull, don't you think you should buy a bull from people that use bulls? I don't know if that makes sense, but that just hit me. Like there's so many people that go out and buy the ET bull calf to go turn out and breed their cows, but how many people go buy a bull that's out of a natural service sire that was made doing what he is supposed to do? I don't know.
It's not necessarily. I hear the argument on, or I see the discussion sometimes on Facebook or this and that, natural versus ET. And it's not that ET makes cattle not work and not perform versus a natural calving cow that's done the work, because there still could be the genetics there that make it work. But when you figure in the management or the lack thereof, what it took to produce that ET bull is that's the issue. The selection and the direction of the breeding programs that got them to that point. It's a lot easier to trust it, at least these days, a lot easier to trust in those natural ones that got there doing it the hard way in the natural way.
And ET does not make the calf better.
That's right.
It just makes more of them.
Yeah.
And
it's still like making any product. You got to put good in to get good out. If you put bad in, you get bad out. So,
and it's somewhat flippant. If there's a bull that's out there that you really like, whether he's a high performance bull that the semen's rare on, or he's a show champion, if you drop $2,000 on him and you get one certificate with him, well, you're more than happy to go back and buy certs later for all of your 150 ET calves that you go make out of him, because you have just extended that a whole lot more than taking him home and dropping that $2,000 straw semen down a cow and hoping that you got a bred once.
Yeah, ET's definitely not the devil. ET's a very, very good thing. Kerry Crow put it best, and he said, he was talking about Transova. He said Transova We're just the gas pedal.
Yeah.
You're the one stepping on
Yep,
it.
yep,
You got the
yep.
steering wheel in your hand. We're just the gas pedal.
You can almost look at ET and IVF and all that as the same way you can look at a gun. It could be extremely useful if used the right way, but it can be extremely detrimental if used the wrong way.
Well, and it's just everybody's got a different attitude about who their best cow is. And if you took 20 people and you brought them into your herd, whoever you are, and you had more, assuming you have more than 20 cows, you'd probably have a different. Each one of those guys would pick differently for a different reason.
Mm-hmm.
But some of them are going to say, "Oh, 65 over there is my favorite cow because I asked to see her mother. I asked to see her production record. I asked to see her individual performance data. I actually asked you what her daggone birth weight was. I did things like that. I mean, just it's every cow, and I've heard it said on another one of these podcasts before, but I just feel like saying it myself. Just because you aspirate her does not necessarily make her a donor.
Yes.
But you have to have a plan. And I mean, we've talked about one kind of deal, and this whole discussion got started because of an FFA speech that Brock gave. And having to help a 15-year-old justify explain something that he knows in his gut is right. Because when we've gotten dry, the easiest thing, the cows that have gone to town, I have not shipped a cow that's calved in the last 6 months. I haven't shipped a cow that calved in the last 12 months. But it sure makes it easy when it looks like this floor down there right now. I think what I do is if I hold some of those that I've been making excuses for, if I let some of them go to town and let some of these cows have a little bit higher position in my thinking based off actually what they've done instead of how they look or how much they cost when we bought a little handful of outside cattle, I know I'm going to be better off. Iron sharpens iron, and if drought will make your cow herd better, but it sure will make it smaller for a pretty good amount of time.
No, I hear you. And we always hear people, at least I have, in the breed that'll just bash on Brahman fertility. But how many people are having this conversation? How many people are selectively trying to improve it? I guess that's probably where we run into the most issues. Is I just don't know if there's anybody really trying to improve it, or a small portion of the ones that Brandon just
They
listed
sit there
on his
looking
5
at the
fingers.
ball versus trying to push it in the
Yeah, they're
direction
like-
they want to go.
Yeah, they're just complaining, but they're not doing anything to fix the problem.
And they throw their hands up and they buy a really good set of recips, and when you decide you're going to do most of what you do through ET, you've already accepted a great amount of failure that's in there because you never put 30 embryos and 30 recip cows and get 30 of them bred. I guess we've already conditioned ourselves to accept a low degree of fertility, and we shouldn't be there. That doesn't mean, again, we may never get there, but you don't have to push this rope very far, and it's real dollars in your pocket, and it's a real contribution to the germplasm of this breed.
Boom. There's two good reasons to think about it and work on it. Is your cattle are going to get better, you're going to make more money, the breed's going to get better. In turn, more people are going to want Brahman cattle. In turn, we then again make more money. It just only makes sense. Brandon and Jimmy, your final thoughts on this, and I know that this conversation will probably spark more conversations, but just kind of wrap up a conclusion of where we're at.
I think we confuse fertility, maternal ability, and getting after your butt that a Brahman cow will do. They're three completely different things, but I think we need to separate out. I look at a lot of people's early weaning programs and all that, and they've made up their mind that they as the human being, they can replace lactation, but they can't replace conception. And it's a conception game. And I think the more we think about that, the more we concentrate on getting them bred, by definition, more of them are going to stay bred.
Yeah. I would say just kind of a rough overview. As Brahman breeders, I feel like in general, we tend to be reactionaries, but I think we should swap to a position of proactiveness and managing beforehand to set a cattle up for success versus not thinking about it after the preg check and when you go home and get sick to your stomach and want to sell all your cows. So look inwards. What am I doing to set them up for success? Now, we got to keep in mind the cattle work for us. We don't work for them. But at the same time, we, just like any employee in any business, we have to give them the tools and the opportunities to make it happen. And
we got to kick all the rocks out of the road.
That's right. And so mitigating environment, navigating nutrition, there's so many different things that we have to do. Make sure we're working on starting with cattle that have fertility to begin with.
Brahman breeders know, you want the finest herd, you have to start with the finest Brahman bull semen. And there's no finer selection than at BRC Ranch. Our champion makers are exactly that, but we know variety is essential. We also offer semen from low birth weight bulls, polled/scurred bulls, and sexed heifer semen. BRC Ranch works to release orders within 3 to 5 business days, but you can always stop by the ranch to pick up your order too. Bring the top Brahman sires to your ranch. Go online to shopbrcutrer.com.
I just hope it spurs discussion, because one of the things that the best part of the last 3 years of my life has been, since my dad died, I've had to think about a whole lot of things myself that I used to just ask him, hey, what should I do? And since he passed, I've been able to kind of unroll, I think, what some of his thought process behind some of the just given things that we did were. And I think his biggest thing was always do the best you can to stay out of the cow's way. Do the best we can to do right by them. We don't have to set it up on the tee for them, but there needs to be more discussion at the granular level. And this is a pretty granular level, but it's about the number one. The SPA program nationally has always said, and I'll close on this, the number one indicator of cow-calf profitability is pounds weaned per cow exposed, not weaning weight.
That's right.
Not breeding percentage, pounds weaned per cow exposed. It's an optimization game. And I think this hour and 20 plus minute of discussion increases that number.
This just opens up another can of worms. But I've got 2 points to make. One, teeing those cows up for success, but at the same time, not spoiling them or not making those helpful things into crutches and that they can lean on. The beauty of a Brahman cow is that she can do more with less, and that's how she was developed from where they came from in India, in those harsh environments. They adapted to optimize their environment.
What's the Bubba Sartwell quote that he told you?
One of the most impactful quotes I ever heard in my life was on the way back. We were on a trip to Oklahoma, and Mr. Bubba was in the car with us. Gerald Young and Milton Carranza were in a car driving back from Oklahoma, and Mr. Bubba told me something that at the very little while it was told to me, it just kind of went off my back. But he's like, the worst thing we ever did to a Brahman cow was put her in an improved Bermuda grass pasture. And at the time, I was like, this is crazy.
What does that even mean?
What's this crazy old man talking about? That may have been an hour into the trip. We still had 7 hours to go. By the end of that trip, that's what I thought about. And I'm thinking, he's exactly right. If a cow that was bred to perform on junk in terms of environment and forage and maybe the lack thereof, if she's bred to perform at a high level, if you take that same cow and put her in a, air quotes, improved Bermuda grass pasture, feed her 10 pounds a day, and you're giving those crutches, if she can't perform in that good environment, she sure ain't going to do that in that bad environment. And where are we selling our cattle to that we're producing as seed stock producers? Right back into that bad environment. So we're setting our customers up for failure if we're not paying attention to the basics and what brought us to the dance in the first place by extra supplementation, making the cows have a padded, pampered life. We've got to kind of put those cows through the crucible ourselves and performance test them in that scenario to make sure that they can be productive for when we get ready to turn out that product, that they'll be successful to those customers that where they're going.
Well, you can't raise a rose like an orchid. And we present a lot of orchids to people, and we start telling them all the things that have got to happen for this deal to work right. And really, all they want to do is turn a bull out and go seine calves up.
Yep.
And we used to do that. Some real wise person told somebody once, and the kid repeated it. Worst thing he did, and then bred all them guts out of them Bremer cows.
Bred the heart out of them,
Bred the heart out of them. The heart and the guts are gone from them, and that's part of too. But I also think if you go through and you look at the cows, that if you could magically go through digital beef and find the cows that calve on roughly a 365-day basis, and you could see a photograph of each of them, I'm just imagining that about 95% of them are pretty deep in the heart, pretty deep in the flank. I'll be honest with you, probably got more slope from hooks to pins than, because one of the things
bone
that got less bone, and I feel like I'm kind of repeating some of the reasons I heard both in the F1 show and in the Own Cattle show. With no slight to Quest Newberry, he did a fine job in bred and owned, but he comes from a different perspective than those other two gentlemen do. But it was super refreshing. I was sitting next to Troy Tesh during the third or fourth, I think it was the last class of the junior division in the F1 show, and Dr. Mark Miller, he pulls his first place heifer across, and he's doing a beautiful job of describing her. And he says, I think a bunch of people would fault this heifer for her slope from hooks to pins, but I praise it, and that's why I've got her there, because you Brahman people don't understand where part of your breed back comes from. And it comes from God giving you enough slope from hooks to pins. How much of our fertility issues are that these cows have got a low-grade infection going on in their area? Brandon was worried about saying something nasty earlier, but in their girl area back here, how many of them don't they don't kick all the placenta out? They've still got some liquid that's there, or they get kicked to death kicking a 90-pound calf out, and there's a little tear someplace that goes. I mean, everything's got to happen right to get her to breed back in that 75 days. If you're going to back her up a month and you've got to breed her in 45 days, you probably have one estrus to hit her on right there. Everything has to go right. But just because everything has to go right doesn't mean it's impossible, because it happens in lots of herds every day. Why and how? I think it's a question of, do we leave it up and say, oh, well, God just lets it happen if it's supposed to happen? Which is generally what we say when it's nutrition, or genetics rather. He programmed them to do it. They can either do it or they can't. More of them can do it, but it's selection prior to implementing the management on them. I think we can get it there, but I think you like your cows a lot worse. One of my favorite things I ever saw on Twitter was a Hereford breeder who put up and said, if you want to guarantee that you hate what your cows look like, select on nothing but carcass traits for 5 years, and you'll have the ugliest.
I love that quote.
You'll have the ugliest set of cows. I sent it to Keaton when I saw it. I'm like, man, that guy's dead on. I think in the converse, if you're selecting around, you're going to find cattle that are kind of a little bit more moderate. Y'all think everybody out there listening to Sartwell talking about moderate says, oh yeah, they like these little bitty 900-pound. No, it's not the case.
That's not that.
Brandon and Keaton have driven all over these cows. They know I got some that are just as big as they've got.
There is a difference. I think the people misdefine the word moderate. When people say moderate, in a lot of people's mind, they think automatically small.
That's not what that word even means.
Moderate means
middle.
Middle. And in the
mode.
But it's also the middle to what fits in your environment, So, I mean, within our own cow herd, we've got some 2,300-pound elephants, and we've also got some 1050 kind of cows.
The Noah's Ark cow.
And that's right. But my cow, I call my Noah's Ark cow. That's, if I had to start over, that's the one I'd start over with if we had some kind of apocalypse.
She ain't a hair over 1,100 pounds.
No, she's wonderful, but she's good udder. She breeds every year. She's maternal merit. She has a perfect udder. Her calves grow like crazy because she milks. She's wonderful. That's a good place to start. But we've got to make sure we understand and make sure we are defining the terms right. Moderate does not mean small, but we're trying to optimize. Like you were saying earlier when we were talking about, let's say we've got an 1,100 pound cow versus a 1,600 pound cow. An 1,100 pound cow is calving every single year, raising a 550 pound calf on minimal inputs. And you've got a 1,600 pound cow, but she's raising an 800 pound calf, but she's only doing it every 18 months. And you still got to feed her a little bit while she's doing it. And she's costing you more money. So at the end of the day, when you send those calves to the sale and then multiply that out over the years, who's making you more money?
Doesn't matter what the market is. 0 head times the market price is still $0. But I think part of it is maybe it's moderating our expectations of what each of these individuals ought to be able to do. But I think the herds that I know of, and we've talked about them, that select on these fertility traits are truly some of our longer lived herds in the breed. I mean, you're more likely to go find an 11, 12-year-old cow. Think of some of those cows that we saw on our trip that we took last summer down to the southeast. Plenty of them that are there that when they tell you the cow's 12, you got to quit lying to me. That's a 6-year-old cow. And you really got to study her bag to see how chewed up her teats are to really believe, okay, she probably has had 9 or 10 calves go through this factory. But it's just, there's nothing in the world. Let's start with, would I rather win the Houston Open show or go 30 for 30 on natural service preg check?
Ooh. That's an easy question for me because I'd rather go for that 30 for 30. You ask somebody else.
This lady whose office we're sitting in right now, she might say, I'd trade you a 28 for 30 for a Houston championship. But for me, honest to God, both of them are pretty much equally unattainable.
Yeah.
But I know which one I get to.
Uh-huh.
And I know which one will keep us in business and allow us to take this ranch and go from the 4th to the 5th generation, which I've got, you and I are both sitting here with 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls, that all 4 of them indicate that they want to be part of this deal through their life. And what can I do? I'm 54. What can I do? The Bible says 70 in your own house money after that. If I've got 25, 30 years left, what can I do to leave this cow herd in a better spot for my sons? And I think I could drive in any different direction, but the one I can do that will materially provide them an income is to hit harder and be more intentional on selection for fertility than I've ever been before.
I agree. I was just writing down on my paper kind of the selection fertility based on results versus there's so many people, and I'm a judging coach, so I'm guilty of it myself, just making almost 100% selection based on phenotype. And even if you're selecting on the traits that you think add to fertility, at the end of the day, you're probably making a minimal dent on fertility in comparison to that person that did like the things we talked about, kept the replacement heifers that were born in the first half of the calving season, cull cows after they missed, things like that, versus just selecting based on phenotype.
Now, Dr. Bonsma,
he would
told people all over Texas in 1966 that you could look at them and listen to go watch PJ Butler judge a show, and I walk away every time I'm with PJ, and I'm like, man, you gave me more to think about, because that's the closest thing to listening to Dr. Bonsma speak right now, which PJ, that's high compliment. I know that's the way you'll take it. But when you read those Wortham lectures and you listen, when he talks about all of the different factors around that environmental wheel, about why you can take cattle east to west, but not west to east under certain traits, why you can take cattle from the United States to Argentina, maybe you can't go the opposite direction with them. All that work that they did at those experiment stations at either end of Africa on moving those cattle back around and all that. I'll also further say, ain't none of us Dr. Bondsman either, and none of us looked at as many livestock of all species that
we could look at 100 of them every day and probably not get there now.
Ever, because, and part of it is too, he knew the results before he looked at them. So if you do that, you can probably back into some pretty good inferences on them. But Again, I still think I can walk into somebody's herd, and if they say, here's 3 cows, and here are 3 vastly different performance histories on them, I'd like to think I could get at least 2 of the 3 of them in the right hole. But I have to admit, from my background, it's going to be making some assumptions based on fleshing condition at the time that I looked at them, and probably looking at frame, and probably looking at just at barrel capacity.
Cowman stuff. That's my challenge to Brahman breeders. Do more cowman stuff.
So
Let's do some cowboy stuff.
that challenge to be in a Brahman breed, that's a great. And I was just sitting here thinking the same thing. If I had to advise a new breeder on how to be successful in what they do, I'd say get out there and travel. Visit people in different environments. The more different, the better. That have these Brahman cows and are making them work, and try to find the traits that no matter where you are will make them work. So, I mean, we gave the example earlier of Kempfers in Florida, and there's so many fantastic breeders down there in Florida, from Marcus Shackford, Kempfers, to Larry Bartle and his family, and so many more. The Partons when they were down there, and the Partons that are still left down
Larry
there.
Ford up north.
All those guys in Florida. Then you go across the country to the high desert of Arizona, and it's a completely different deal. But no matter what, I imagine you find the same traits in those cattle. They're being sound, that are cows that are feminine, bulls that are masculine, and the variations of traits that make them specific to those different environments might be smaller than you think. But you got to have the basics to make them work anywhere. Then you can tweak them to fit the environment. But I would highly recommend a new breeder, before you ever make a purchase decision, get out there and travel, know your own environment, and be realistic about it. Visit people in your environment who are successful. Then go visit people outside of your environment who potential customers are, and see what cattle work for them and the traits that you need to select for. And I think that'll set you further ahead of the game. It's really eye-opening experience, for me at least, the more we get out and travel and see things that truly work, different management practices that work in different environments. And you also get to meet so many great people and not just take somebody's word for it.
When you get to ask them questions like this, you get to ask their philosophy. And really, when you ask somebody what their philosophy is, what they're really telling you is, here's all the things I've done that didn't work over the years. The number of times growing up, my dad would have somebody call the stockyards during the week, say, hey, we'd like to come, young couple, we've scraped money together. We want to come buy 1 2-year-old heifer from you. And by the time they left, Dad would have sold them 3 8 9-year-old cows. And told them, look, I can turn loose for the same money that you brought. And he made some pretty good bargains over the years too. But for that same deal, we'd have an 8 9-year-old cow that had 3 heifers that were all better than her in the herd. That's a true mark of any parent, period, of any kind of species. They made better. Maybe she missed. She had a calf or 2 left in her, and they could go do that and get a hold of something better and have a chance of making 3 calves in 1 year instead of maybe 1 calf 18 months from now, when that 2-year-old was finally ready to domino and get a calf off of her. But there's so many different ways to do it. But I think one of the truisms that we can take is, you have to go visit some place where those cattle are ranched.
Yes.
You can take cattle that are ranched and bring them back into a small acreage environment. I found very few cattle from small acreage environments interest the folks who ranch their cattle.
That's very true.
For the reason that, for a lot of the reasons that Brandon said, they don't care about how many shows they won. They're just looking at a fat 2-year-old going, God, I got to milk this dude first before I can turn him out on cows. And he's got to cover from here to there. And I think in some of the places we've been, those cattle are in 6 inches of water all year long.
The only people that care about international champions and champion this and champion that are other Brahman breeders. So it's hard to sell that to a guy who is out in West Texas ranching those cows and making them breed Herefords and this and that, making those bulls work and making those cows work and be productive, because they're not looking at the same traits.
No, I agree. Well, I probably am going to go ahead and wrap this deal up.
Wrap up
before
part
we
B.
go.
Yeah.
Before we go into a 3-parter.
Yeah,
Another direction.
I know we can sell a 2-parter, but I know for a fact we can't sell a 3-parter.
3-parter.
We're gonna
at least
we're gonna
selling
go
it
ahead
to Rachel.
and get ready to cut it off. But I mean, just kind of me wrapping this up. I think if you're in a group of people and y'all aren't having these kind of conversations on a daily or a weekly basis, you probably need to find a new group of people to associate and do business with. I don't know if we solved one problem, but at least when we leave here, all of us are going to be thinking about this.
Thinking.
So,
yeah, I was at, what did we say the title was going to be earlier?
Unpacking Brahman Fertility.
Yeah, I think maybe an AKA to that might be ramblings of just guys who are around cows a lot. So,
we definitely unpacked it. I don't know if we put anything back.
Yeah, or organized it.
Based off our discussion today, I am going to go back. One thing that will be done different is I will go ahead and put cedars in and pull them. And I'm going to see if we can't pull some of these cheetah steal a calf here or there and pull them back and see if I can't get some of these cows that I think in my head have got some fertility bred into them. Let's see if we can push them just a little bit.
Yep.
So that is at least one different thing that'll be done.
I learned some stuff in this. Jimmy apparently learned some stuff in this. And so hopefully everybody that's listening picks something up from this podcast that'll help their production system run more efficiently, maybe put more dollars in your pocket. But Brandon, you got anything? If not, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you, Jimmy, so much. The conversations we always seem to have are fantastic. But
yeah, I felt like this was a good one, at least just to get people thinking. And, just wrapping it up, I'd say think about being more proactive versus reactive.
You're not helpless. You're not helpless.
Yep. So be more reactive, be more proactive, not reactive. Do more cowman stuff. All right, perfect. Thank you, Jimmy. We'll go ahead and sign out.
You've been listening to the Over the Hump podcast. Our passion is Brahman cattle, and it runs deep. And this show is about its rich history, industry trends, and stories that define the American Brahman. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on Instagram and Facebook at Cutrer. See you next time on the Over the Hump podcast.